I think that one's not working. Yep. Oh, I see what we're doing. Yep. Yeah, sadly, my little brother is sick tonight and will not be able to come down. But my name's Shark. I am a direct activist, mutual aid organizer who's been doing it for 10 years and has been involved in work from journalism to anti-police and ICE activism to mutual aid and houselessness support on cities up and down the West Coast.
Thank you so much. My name is Alma Castro. I am the current co-chair of Santa Fe DSA, and I am a city councilor. Thank you so much.
My name is Elena Ortiz, and I'm from Oke-Owinge and Ogapoge-Owinge. I'm a member of Red Nation and a founding board member of Red Media, which is an indigenous media project designed by and for Native people.
Which rules?
Yes, which is amazing. She's the real draw tonight, so thank you. Real power hour and Nation for the work that you do. So I will start. Bradley is a big reason that we are here today. This is a function of the Santa Fe DSA book club, and we did read the Malm book and decided that we wanted to talk a little bit about direct action, especially in these crazy times. What is the role, and I'm gonna start with this question for everyone, what is the role of direct action in creating change?
So the role of direct action in creating change is actually to get us out of our comfort zones and stand up for what we believe and not be performative and not be sitting in front of a computer posting things and thinking that makes us activists. Being an activist, you know, to paraphrase Che Guevara, like if you're not willing to die for it, it's not worth living for. And it's important that we all realize that in this day and age, because these things are happening around us, and you know, you're either part of the solution or you're the problem.
I think you kind of said it all there. And the one addition I would add to that is that I think direct action is the best cure for nihilism in movements. I think that so often, like with so many of these characters, you see we get pushed to a point of political nihilism. And I think that often comes from the sense of powerlessness. So I think there's all these wonderful benefits to the world and to the movement for direct action that you highlighted really well. And then benefits to yourself and your own resiliency to get out there and do something, like put your hands on something and change something and not wait around for it. To do it yourself really helps.
And I will give the perspective of the big bad government official. It pushes people like me who have chosen to play a different game and sort of be part of a system that is oppressive and horrible to make change. So I'll give a really great example. Last night, I had to be at work until midnight, thankfully, because members of the city union spoke up and said that it was absolutely ridiculous that they have been working 7 years without a contract signed with the city of Santa Fe. And the best thing that could have happened was keep people like me, elected officials, sitting there, listening to them and their demands. And so we went back into our little executive session and had to talk about what that really means in terms of creating change, where we want to allocate resources, and what it is that we want the city to look like. And that is a drop in the bucket when it comes to activism, right? That's a group of union members who came and told their employer that they didn't like what was happening. That took courage, but what we saw today took a lot more courage. And so my next question is sort of on that vein of what Che Guevara said. Is civil disobedience something that we are able to do today? I know that a lot of folks have concern about immigration status, about being incarcerated for our beliefs. We just saw Leonard Peltier released after being incarcerated as a political prisoner in this country, even though he was born here. So we have repercussions. How do we as a community deal with those repercussions?
That's a good question, and I understand that undocumented people and those in historically marginalized groups have a great deal more to lose than white people. So white cis hetero people to the front. and anyone else behind them. Like, we need to be protected when we're out on the streets, because we're the ones who are going to get attacked. We're the ones who are going to get thrown in jail. We're the ones who are going to get doxxed. And that's happened time and time again. So if you're a white, cis, hetero ally, you stand in the front. You protect the rest of us. You go first. And that's a direct opposite of what has historically happened. It's always been the marginalized people who've been in the front, and we've been the ones who have taken the most harm. So that's one of the things. Civil disobedience, I'm not much on civil disobedience. Like, honestly, we're past civil disobedience right now. We're like direct action. Get out there on the streets and start throwing hawassos, because no one's going to do it for us. And direct action to me means standing in the way of the bulldozers and really putting your body on the line for what you believe in. And it's not being done enough. We, the people, like, those words should resonate with people, right? Except not in the way that you think. We, the people, we must act. If we act, the leaders will follow. The leaders are not going to act on our behalf. We are the new leaders. We are the new ancestors. And we need to stand up for what we believe, so that down the line, our descendants, the people that look to the past to guide them, will say, at least they stood up for us. At least they made a stand. At least they stood for what was right. At least they stood for liberty. At least they stood up for their kin. At least they stood up for their comrades. I'm not seeing that now. And particularly, I'm not seeing that in Santa Fe. I'm seeing it in other places, but I'm not seeing it here. Why? We've all gotten too comfortable, right? That comfort is about to be ripped away. What are we going to do? That's a challenge.
Yeah, I think, to just underscore the idea that the fewer oppressed intersections you have, if you're white, if you're straight, if you're all of these things that society loves, you're more comfortable than anyone, and you will be more loath to give up that comfort. When I was a little baby activist, the hardest thing that anyone ever said to me is, I was entering a space that was a very Black radical space, and they said, you're going to come in here and you're going to sit down and you're just going to shut the fuck up. Just going to shut the fuck up, and people are going to tell you what to do for a while, and you're going to do it, and you're not going to ask questions. And I have never been less comfortable, because I spent my whole life having my opinions and my safety and my sense of decency be the guiding light of whatever community I was in. And getting uncomfortable is the core of action, of direct action, for people who aren't from marginalized intersections. So I think that's a really good point.
Thank you so much. And talking about privilege, I've always often talked about privilege as a key, and being a person who is cis passing and is from here and has documents. It is my responsibility to use those keys to open up doors for other people. And so many times people have asked me, oh, well, why did you do this? Well, we have to, right? As Elena mentioned, there isn't work being done in Santa Fe. In the last 5 years that I've been back home, I moved back in 2020. I was organizing temp workers in Chicago, and it was really saddening to see the change in my community and the lack of desire for people who grew up here and were part of a community I recognized to take a role in leadership, either because it isn't something they feel will make a difference, as we saw today. Radical change really makes us feel like we can do something about this oppressive and overwhelming specter of capitalism, and I will name it. The reason that we are all here today is that capitalism is not working for us. And we don't want to be incarcerated anymore. We don't want to be hunted anymore. And we want to feel safe in our communities. So I'm going to turn it over. Bradley, do you mind seeing if anyone has questions for us? Yes. Thank you.
Can I dive into one real quick before we get to you?
Definitely,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we were chatting for a moment in the lobby about a question that I think the movie really dealt with that I would love to get into for one moment, which is that I think the whole gist of the movie is that violence is something that every activist engages in at some level and is in some ways socially constructed. And it's this kind of boogeyman that we all are running from constantly in activist spaces. Blowing up a pipeline is violent, and so putting on that movie is edgy. But the thing the movie's pushing on is blowing up a pipeline more violent than a chemical plant? Is it more violent than taking someone's home from them? Is it more violent than what's happened to indigenous people here for centuries? Is it more violent than ICE? I think there's an obvious answer to that question, but I would love more thoughts on that. I think it's such an interesting problem.
So I'm going to disagree with you that blowing up a pipeline is violence. Violence is what's happening in Palestine. Violence is ICE. Violence is unhoused people being treated like criminals. Violence is lack of health care. Violence is walking downtown as an indigenous person and seeing our relatives kneeling down in front of the Palace of the Governors, selling stuff because that's the only way that they can make a living to live in this community. It's looking at the stores around the plaza and realizing that everything that's in there is part of an economy that was created by tourism, which this city thrives on. And that's violence. Violence is minimum wage not supporting families. Violence is boarding schools. Violence is land theft. Violence is everything that this country is based on. Violence is capitalism. Capitalism is violence. Blowing up a pipeline is self-defense. And it's important when you're talking about violence to separate what this colonial project that is the United States of America, KKK, is, which is capitalism. Everything built on theft of land from indigenous people, built on the labor of enslaved Africans. That's violence. This country is based on that violence. Blowing up a pipeline, standing up for your relatives, chasing ICE away from your neighborhoods, that's self-defense. Chasing them away with a baseball bat is self-defense. That is not violence. Violence is what is happening to the working class people. And when we look at material conditions on the ground right now, as a Marxist, I look at the material conditions on the ground right now, and everything that I see is leading me to believe the only way we're going to solve this crisis in this town, in this state, in this country, is by standing up together. Together, if we stand up, stop going to work, block the streets, whatever it is necessary to change the material conditions here, that's the only thing that's going to work. This is not a democracy. This is not a republic anymore. This is pure greed, pure capitalism, and that is the violence.
It's hard to follow that. Thank you so much, Elena. 100% agree with that sentiment. And as we see families separated, as we see folks incarcerated, as we see the violence inflicted upon our bodies through chemical processes, right? We saw it in the film. I have friends that are from Carrizozo and have dealt with the fallout of the testing that they did and the bombing that they did in New Mexico, saying that there was no one here, saying that there were no repercussions of their testing that then they used to go kill other people halfway across the world. But this was the first place that had to deal with the fallout of what is now happening at Llano, right? We continue to create plutonium pits. We are continuing to poison our water supply, our air, our community. And in Santa Fe, I see in the audience friends of mine who can no longer afford to live in this city because we have been pushed out. that is violence. And I agree that there is something that needs to hold that line. And fortunately or unfortunately, it is us. We are the leaders that we were waiting for. We cannot continue to be complacent. Anybody have questions for us? Bradley?
Hi, I have so many questions actually, but I'm going to try to narrow it down to one. I think as somebody who is now in a foreign country and had been organizing back home, I struggle a lot now in figuring out how to organize in this country. And you spoke earlier about, you know, the white people need to be at the front of the line, and they're the ones that need to be protecting people like me who are at all of these crossroads of marginalization. But I find that I don't trust white people to lead that charge, and I feel that the leaders that we need are the ones that are in most danger. So I'm just wondering how one organizes when there's so much kind of violence that's also waiting for you if you continue to take action.
I guess I'll start a little bit with the anecdote that Shark shared. I think there's a difference between leadership and who's driving the narrative, and strategy and who is at the forefront of those battles. I spent a lot of time organizing in the immigrants' rights field, and I am a citizen of the United States, and I was born here. And even though I come from a mixed family, I hold more responsibility over some of those actions because I can. So yes, I think we talk about white bodies, but it really has to do with privilege and who is safer and who has the ability to push harder against the system.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, in this area, in New Mexico, Arizona, in the Southwest, Indigenous people should always be leading the actions, but not be in the front lines, because we're the ones who are going to get we're the ones in the most dangerous place. And so Indigenous people should be leading because it's our land. And honestly, before the rest of y'all got here, and I'm not saying you audience, but before the rest of the people got here, we were doing pretty well on our own. Indigenous people our voices should always be centered. We should always be leading, but not in the front, because that's where we're in the most danger. And organizing, I agree, is really challenging right now. And my comrade Justine, who's in the back there filming, we have done a lot of direct action together in the past. We have not done it for a while. It is very, very dangerous right now. And as activists, it's hard to sit and watch what's going on in the world. It's also harder to do if you're dead. So as a Marxist, as a communist, as someone who has always been and always will be for the people, and where the people lead, we follow. Right now, we're watching, we're waiting, we're reading the material conditions on the ground so that we can determine the best path forward. And the best path forward for all of us activists is to see where the people will lead. It may not be anyone in this room. It may not be anyone in the Red Nation. It may not be anyone in DSA. But when the workers, when the proles get tired of working for minimum wage and not being able to pay their rent in the city they grew up in, when they rise up, that's where we are. That's where we'll be. And that's important.
And I think, just to give the rarely heard white perspective on an issue, one of my favorite organizers in history is a guy named Witold Pilecki, who organized a resistance cell inside Auschwitz. And when he was doing that, he said that the people he chose for that cell were the ones who he saw do an action that helped another person and harmed them. Help other people, gain nothing. You want to know if you can trust the white people you organize with? Put them in that position. Do it over and over and over again. And that's how you'll learn. Start small, test them, make it hard, build it up. And I think that is a methodology for how to organize well with people who have privilege in general, is that like they have to prove it and they have to keep proving it. And there's no moment where they can stop proving it because they get to walk away and marginalized people don't. And so seeing them do it a lot is the only way to build that trust, in my opinion.
I'm just going to take a minute to plug some mutual aid efforts. I don't know if Shirk wants to speak to, Elena did speak to the violence of the state against the unhoused folks, but there's some efforts that you can get involved in here in Santa Fe and through DSA, Burrito Brigade.
Yeah, some friends and I grew up houseless as a teenager. I kind of bounced around. And so I've always had a soft spot in my heart for how good one meal can be for someone. And so some friends and I, some members of DSA, some anarchist folks, some members of this crowd who I love dearly, get together. We cook 80 to 100 burritos a week. We hand them out to the houseless community or anyone who wants to come. And we hand out food and we hand out medical supplies and we hand out a moment of actual connection to people that are often treated like windows rather than human beings. So we do this every Saturday and Sunday. We would love to have you. Please come out. It's a very simple action that changes the whole shape of a week for a houseless person.
And in one of these wonderful moments of connection, I realized that many of the community that we're feeding are migrants, do have some limitations because they don't function fully in English language, and they're being exploited by folks who feel that this is the time to take advantage of their status, of their inability to find resources and steal their wages and treat them poorly. There is still so much work to do in this city. We cannot stop. We might think that we are a liberal city and the bubble of whatever Mecca we choose to think. Santa Fe is quickly becoming very toxic for poor people.
Santa Fe's always been very toxic. Like, no lie. I grew up here and it's always been toxic. I probably didn't know it was toxic until I was in high school, but I grew up with the Fiesta Council coming to my school as a child. I grew up with Don Diego de Vargas. I grew up with all of these conquistadors, streets named after them, schools named after them, malls named after them. And when I stood up in a school board meeting and said we were celebrating genocide, I needed an armed guard to get out of that meeting. Santa Fe has always been toxic. It's just time to pull the veil away and realize, not the people. There are some great people here. Not the people, but the foundation this city was founded on is toxic, and it needs to change. And it's always been terrible for poor people. Even when I was growing up, it was terrible for poor people. And this is a city that has so many wonderful things about it, from all of the different people who come through and the immigrants. I mean, these trade routes that come through Ogapoge have been in place for 10,000 years. These were my ancestors coming up. These were if you're from here, your ancestors coming up to trade with my ancestors. This was a place of connection. And now it's a place where rich people have all these second homes and no one else can afford to live here because the property taxes are too high. And that's violence. That's what that is. And it's time to reclaim this whole area. And the only way we're going to do it is to stand up and say, no more. We, the people. Ya basta. Ya basta.
So we have about 15 more minutes, and I do want to give us some time to mingle outside and ask questions. But I will do one small plug for some of the work that I'm doing in the city of Santa Fe. I feel very isolated in my fight against the Santa Fe Police Department. I don't have a lot of support from my colleagues around limiting all of the resources and support that we're giving to militarize the Santa Fe Police Department. We currently own 3 armored vehicles called Bearcats that we spent about $3 million of your tax dollars on. This has to change. 7 years without a city contract for AFSCME workers, the people who do the hard work every single day, and continuous raises for Santa Fe Police Department while they continue to brutalize and murder Santa Fe residents. So I ask in a closing statement to support Red Nation and the work that they're doing, to support DSA and Burrito Brigade and the work that they're doing, and to continue to fight for what we know is right, which is not incarceration and violence. Thank you.
Well, and for all that money and all those raises and all those expensive toys, they're still afraid of women. They're still afraid of Indigenous women.
Yes.
Because down on the plaza, when we gather with our deadly force cardboard signs, they're afraid of us. They stand on the rooftops and point machine guns at us. When we're out there, women, young people, when we're out there protesting, they're pointing guns at us. They're arresting people. So for all of their toys and all of their money, they're still afraid. What does that tell you? We, the people.
Thank you so much for being here. It is an honor. And we will have some refreshments and have time to mingle outside. Thank you so much for being here. And remember, direct action, you can do it.
Thank you for joining tonight's live stream. This live stream was empowered by viewers like you. Please support the work of Red Media. That is the only way we're able to mobilize to the scene, to where the things are happening. Thank you all, especially if you're a fan of Red Power Hour. Thank you for showing up to support Elena. Once again, you can support Red Media on Patreon. You can sustain our work monthly there, or you can make a one-time donation on our GoFundMe. Thank you so much for empowering our work. Everybody have a good night. Thank you.